I think all in all, the talent is there, but will they have the cohesiveness necessary to make a run? That is the question mark right now for the Texas Longhorns. Hello and welcome in. It's always college football. Today is Thursday, August 7th, and we appreciate those of you that are coming to us from wherever it is you're coming to us from. If you're here via the podcast platform, we appreciate it very much. Continue to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't. Our episodes will automatically populate on that podcast platform when we put out something new. We're also here on the ESPN College Football YouTube page. So if you haven't subscribed there, go ahead and subscribe. You'll have tons of great content throughout the fall as we navigate throughout this 2025 season. Today is the day. We gave you our 15 teams that are ranked 25 through 11 on Monday's edition of Always College Football. Today we reveal the top 10. And we're not necessarily picking national championship winners just yet, but this is kind of how we see things heading into the season. When we fast forward a couple weeks from now, we will pick those conference champions. We'll pick national championship winner. We'll pick all the different playoff teams that we expect to make the postseason. But that's a little bit more of a projection with where teams might go. Our preseason poll is based a little bit more on what we know. We've already given you 25 through 11, so go back and check Monday's episode if you missed that to see if your team cracked our top 25. And if you haven't heard your team just yet and you think you're supposed to be in it, maybe you made the top 10. Maybe not. The top 10 maybe isn't quite as controversial as 25 through 11 and not quite as interchangeable as 25 through 11. Today's going to be a fun show. All right, we're going to have some fun with this. We're going to go through it. Tell me how ridiculous it is or tell me how good you think it might be. And like most preseason polls, there's probably only going to be one fan base that's pleased with where they rank, and that's the team that's ranked number 1. So let's kick things off with our 10th ranked team in the Always College Football poll. Now, if you missed our show on Monday, what we've done over the last few weeks, we've taken every single Power 4 team and we've placed them in a tier within their conference. Those were detailed breakdowns. Those were in-depth position-by-position breakdowns. So in an effort to kind of speed things up and to avoid redundancy, we've decided to just take two things in this breakdown to kind of tell you why these teams are ranked where they're at. What I love about this team and what concerns me about this team. That's what you'll get here. But if you're wanting more, go back a couple weeks, revisit our tiers shows from the ACC, the Big 10, the Big 12, and the SEC. That's when you'll be able to find kind of exactly what it is we think about your squad this season. Let's kick things off with our 10th team, and that is the Miami Hurricanes. Now, what I love about Miami are their offensive and defensive lines. Let's start with the offensive line. It's clearly the strength of what Mario Cristobal has built over the course of time, dating back to his time at Oregon, even prior to as a position coach and as a coordinator. He is all about the offensive line. He's one of the best in the business of doing it, and he has done it there with the Hurricanes over the last few years, and it feels like this year's version of their offensive line could be the best that he's had. Definitely the strength of the team. And his offensive line coach, Alex Mirabal, they've done a fantastic job of player development as well. You bring back an ACC All-American contender in Francis Maui-Noa on the right side. You bring back guard Inez Cooper and the 6'9", 340-pound Markel Ball. He'll be over there on the left side as well. He's going to be at left tackle. He filled in last year for an injured Jalen Rivers. You got another returning starter, Matthew McCoy. You bring back Ryan Rodriguez from injury, and you bring over TCU's starting center from last year, James Brockermeyer, to kind of fill the void there in the middle of the offensive line. This group has depth, they have power, they have length, they have NFL potential. They have everything you could possibly want and should be able to control the line of scrimmage against just about everybody they face this season. There'll be some tough ones they face, but I believe this offensive line is up to the task. But not to be outdone is what they have coming back on the defensive line. You have one of the best ends in the ACC in Ruben Bain. You can make a case that here in year 3, a contract year for him, he could take a significant jump and become the game wrecker that he was always destined to become. 2 years ago, amazing year. Last year, a little bit banged up at times, but Ruben Bain is poised for a huge 25 campaign. On the other side, you'll have Akeem Mesidor. Feel great about what he has. You do lose an all-ACC defender on the inside in Simeon Barrow, but they've recruited so well. They have a couple of 5-stars from their 2024 class that are heading into their second season in Justin Scott and Armando Blunt. Those guys could surge. Then you also go into the transfer portal and bring over David Blay from Louisiana Tech. The defensive line and the offensive line, that's what I absolutely love about Miami this year. What concerns me is the passing game continuity. If you look at what they had last year with Cam Ward, who went on to become the number 1 overall pick, Strepo, an incredible slot receiver. You had guys that you could rely on, guys that you'd seen. You lose Isaiah Horton in the transfer portal. Now you have a lot of new faces at wide receiver, and you, of course, have a new face at quarterback. Now, I'm bullish on Carson Beck. I think Carson Beck last year at Georgia kind of got a bad rap, if I'm going to be honest. A lot of the blame was put on his shoulders, but the offensive line at Georgia was disappointing last year. The wide receivers dropped a million passes, and a lot was put on Carson Beck's shoulders that probably wasn't fair. He's also coming back off injuries, so the lack of reps in the spring does have me a little bit concerned, hence the passing game continuity being a little bit more holistic than just on Carson Beck's right elbow. But you look at their receivers. CJ Daniels, a couple good years at Liberty a few years back. Ray Joseph should lock down the slot. And they have a bunch of prospects with major upside, like a JoJo Trader, like a Nye Carr, Malachi Tony, Joshua Moore. They have great talent, but they are youthful for the most part at wide receiver. And they have a quarterback that's stepping into a new system under Shannon Dawson this year. Passing game continuity is a little bit of a concern when looking at the Miami Hurricanes. That's why they're ranked 10th and not up there in the top 6 or 5. Let's go next to the number 9 ranked team, the Oregon Ducks. A little lower than most publications would have. But part of the reason why they're a little low is also part of the reason why I really like what they could become as the season goes along. It's a young football team, and they have a lot of new faces. They have a lot of new pieces. But I still feel like the youthful talent is what I'm most excited about. That's what I love. The roster is stacked with blue chip prospects. We'll start at quarterback with Dante Moore. Obviously, massive recruit out of Detroit, goes to UCLA, starts a handful of games as a true freshman, then transfers to Oregon, spent last year learning the system, following Dylan Gabriel's lead, learning the ins and out of what Will Stein, his offensive coordinator, wants him to do. And now he kind of enters into fall camp as the projected starter. I think he's got a chance to have a really, really nice season. You look at wide receiver. Now, there's a bunch of 5-stars in the room. DeCorian Moore might be the guy I'm as excited about as any, because if we look at last year's high school class at wide receiver, Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams went on to become 2 of the best players, regardless of position, in college football last year. Jeremiah Smith might be pound for pound the best player in America. I'm not sure there's an argument to be made for anyone other than him, and yet last year, true freshman. Maybe that's what Moore can provide the Ducks this year. You still have Jaron Dickey. You still have some other guys that you could rely on as well. Love what we've seen from Kenyon Sadiq. Could even have a bigger role this fall, and by season's end could be that tight end difference maker that we saw with Colston Loveland last year, Tyler Warren last year. Is that the ceiling for Sadiq? Hopefully. It might very well be the case, but he now is being thrust into the number 1 role, and I believe the upside is outrageous. And then defensively, in your 2 deep along the defensive line by itself, you have 6 top 100 players in their 2 deep. So 6 out of their 8 players along the defensive line were at one point in the recruiting process top 100 players. So they have youthful excitement, youthful potential, and youthful stars all over their roster that are just waiting for this opportunity. That's what has me so excited about the Ducks this year. Here's what concerns me. The same thing that has me excited also has me the tiniest bit concerned. The returning veteran production. They are 107th in returning production offensively. They are 95th in returning production defensively. And just think about the pieces that have been lost now. Dylan Gabriel, Tez Johnson, Jordan James, Trayshawn Holden, Terrence Ferguson, Evan Stewart now, after an injury this offseason, he's likely to miss a majority of the season. The defensive line loses an All-American, 3 draft picks that were all taken in the top 300, and Derek Harmon, Jordan Birch, and Jamari Caldwell. You lose Jeffrey Bassa there at the second level. You lose both corners. And if you look at the teams that have won national championships the last 2 years, Ohio State last year and Michigan the year before, what did those 2 teams have in common? They had a lot of guys that could have gone to the NFL and decided against going professional, come back as seniors, as veteran 4th and 5th year players to lead their team to the promised land. They've all been super senior laden. And defensively, for example, for Oregon, they're expected to have just 2 senior starters. Now, handful of 3rd year and 4th year players, but the seniors are something that concerns me just a little bit. The leadership contingent is something that I think is worth keeping an eye on with the Oregon Ducks. Love Dan Lanning, love their staff, love their personnel, love their upside. But as far as winning a national championship this year, I just wonder if they have a little bit too much youth to be able to get over the hump. That's why I had them at number 9 right now in my preseason poll. Moving next to number 8. Another team that's probably a little bit too low if you look at most publications, and that's the Ohio State Buckeyes. Now, if you look at last year, it was like they went all in, right? They're rewarded with a remarkable run of NFL draft picks. You're rewarded with a national championship. And there are some questions on this roster. I don't think the talent's in doubt, but the questions are kind of all over the place, frankly. But what you got to love is what we do know about, the known commodities and sheer talent. That's what I love about this roster. So while, yes, there are some question marks at certain position groups, I know what I'm getting from Jeremiah Smith. Every single time he takes the field, I know I have a guy that can take over the game and go 80 yards on any offensive snap for a touchdown. Guy's unbelievable. I know what I'm getting in Carnell Tate. I know that he is a very capable number 2 and will step up in a moment's notice in the event in which a team actually does have some answers for Jeremiah Smith. I know what I can get from Brandon Inniss at wide receiver. I know what I'm getting in the back end defensively with Caleb Downs. I think if not for Jeremiah Smith, you can make a case that Caleb Downs is maybe the best pound-for-pound player in the sport. Unfortunately, Jeremiah Smith is also on his team. So I'm getting high-level productivity from the safety spot as well. I love Sonny Styles. I love after the conversion now to linebacker how he just blossomed last season. Triple-digit tackles, 11 tackles for loss, handful of sacks. What we know about Ohio State is elite. What concerns me is that there is a lot that we don't know right now. Tons of turnover and a new quarterback. Just think about what was lost off last year's roster. They had 14 guys drafted. The NFL all-time record was 15. They had 4 first-rounders. They had 7 guys picked in the first 45 picks. So in the first round and a half, they had 7 Buckeyes hear their name called. I also think at quarterback, while Will Howard has endured a bit of scrutiny, partly because of how he played at the end of the game, final moments of the game against Oregon by sliding, and then how things went against Michigan. Last year, if you look back holistically, I thought he was fantastic. I thought he was remarkably underrated, and the guy played out of his mind in the playoffs and finished the season number 1 in the FBS and QBR. Replacing him, I think, will be more difficult than people realize. Now, am I optimistic about Julian Sayin? Absolutely. Could it be Lincoln Kienholz? Perhaps, maybe. But I'm optimistic about the quarterback, but it's still a little bit of an unknown right now. And knowing how much they put on the quarterback's shoulders and how much turnover that we've seen on defense, how much turnover we've seen on the offensive side as well, I feel good about their offensive line. A lot of turnover, though, in the backfield. There's just a lot of new. But like I said, what we know is elite. But there is too much right now that we don't know about the Buckeyes, which is why they're sitting right there at number 8 in college football for me. At number 7, it's the LSU Tigers. Here's what I love, is their passing attack. Look, last year, they almost completely abandoned the run. They said, look, our best attribute on this roster is our quarterback and our personnel at wide receiver and the way we pass protect. That's what we do best. And Garrett Nussmeier answered every possible challenge last year with the exception of a game or two in which he took a few too many risks. He did have 12 picks last year. But you look at the final moments of the game against Ole Miss, the drive down the field to steal that win, throwing for over 4,000. throwing for nearly 29 touchdowns. I think last year they actually had some challenges at wide receiver too when you look at the vertical passing game, because last year they didn't have the same type of vertical passing game that we've come to expect from LSU, and I think they've addressed that this year. Chris Hilton, after being banged up for most of the season, when he got back, he was a guy that could take the top off the defense. Now he's healthy for this upcoming season. I think Aaron Anderson at slot receiver is one of the best slot receivers in the game. The guy was super effective last year, has great burst, has great twitch, and developed a really nice rapport last year with Garrett Nussmeier. You had two big-time transfers, Berrien Brown from Kentucky, who would just get him the ball. He doesn't have to be a super dynamic route runner. Just get him the ball on screens. Get him the ball at the line of scrimmage and watch what he does with it. The guy holds the all-time SEC record in kickoff return touchdowns, so he can also be impactful in the special teams game as well and has a ton of raw speed. And then on the other side, you bring in Nick Anderson from Oklahoma, who 2 years ago averaged 21 yards a catch, was banged up all throughout 2024. So if he can somehow get back to the way he played in 23, you look at that wide receiver crew as a whole, they could be among the nation's best. You also bring in a tremendous freshman last year in Trey'Dez Green at tight end. Now, Mason Taylor's gone, but Trey'Dez Green is already showcased with that length at 6'7", had a couple touchdowns in the bowl game. He could become a star at tight end as well. So you got those four wideouts plus and matchup nightmare at tight end. The passing attack should be absolutely lethal for the LSU Tigers this year. What concerns me? The offensive line. It's very, very simple. They lost 4 guys to the NFL last year. All 4 were drafted. Will Campbell was a first-team All-American at left tackle, was selected 4th overall. He'd been starting for the last 3 years, did so as a true freshman. On the other side, you lost Emory Jones, who was an all-SEC player. You lose both guards. Now, this was also a team last year that struggled running the football. So with that contingent, they couldn't run it very effectively. How confident are we that they'll be able to run it again this year? If you look at it, they were last in the SEC in rushing yards a game. If you look at the yards per carry numbers, it wasn't very good either. You do go out and add a couple of Power 4 starters in Braylon Moore from Virginia Tech. You bring in Josh Thompson from Northwestern, who was an all Big Ten selection a year ago. You got a 5-star in Carius Kern. Maybe he can factor into the rotation. I would assume that he probably will. And they've recruited really well along the offensive line. But it's just a kind of figuring out who's going to go where, who's going to start where, and can that group keep Garrett Nussmeier upright, and can they be a little better running the football? Because if they can't, it's going to put more pressure on their defense, and that's a group that's hoping to break through in year number 2 under Blake Baker. At number 6, it's the Georgia Bulldogs. Here's what I love, and I think what's kind of been lost this offseason when describing Georgia is how talented they are from an offensive weaponry standpoint. That's what I love. I think Gunnar Stockton and his ability to keep the defense honest with the run game is going to be really impactful. Now, he's not going to be a guy that rushes for 1,000 yards this year. I don't see him as that type of piece. But I do see him as a guy that could be very similar to what Riley Leonard was last year for Notre Dame. A guy that on third down can extend a drive. A guy that on third and short will use quarterback power and push the pile and get that first down. On the red zone plays, I could see quarterback run being a big part of what they do. So I'm going to include him in the offensive weapons because I think his legs make him very different than what we've seen from Georgia the last 2 years when Carson Beck was the starting quarterback. Then I look at their wide receivers and tight ends, and I think it's off the charts good. They get Colby Young back, who last year, if you talk to the Georgia staff, he was probably going to be their go-to guy in the passing game. He's suspended early in the season. They miss him all throughout the year. He's now back and will probably reestablish that potential number 1 role. You also bring back Dylan Bell, who, while he did have his fair share of challenges catching the football last year, if you can get this guy in space, you can create a lot of problems. And I think as a prototypical wide receiver, another year of development will be helpful. Remember, Dylan Bell a couple years back had to switch to running back because they were so thin at that position. You also have the often forgotten about London Humphreys, who I think has a chance to have a solid year as well as a number 3, number 4 wide receiver. And in the event of an injury, I think he could step right in. The nice additions that they made in the portal as well was Zachariah Branch, who is a 5-star guy, great as a return specialist. And we know what Georgia does. They throw a lot of those little screens at the line of scrimmage. Just screen right there, go and get it. Zachariah Branch is perfectly suited to fill that role as a catch and run guy in this offense this year. And they added some length on the outside with Noah Thomas, who at 6'6" led Texas A&M in receiving and was really good on the downfield throws. Oscar Delp and Lawson Lucky are both back veteran players that can be effective in the passing game as well. And then Nate Frazier at running back, I think he's got a chance to really take a step this year. Ball security was a little bit of an issue last year, pass protection a little bit of an issue, but he's got major juice at running back. So the offensive weaponry for Georgia is what I absolutely love. But here's what concerns me: the offensive line. If you look at last year, they were expected to be one of the best offensive lines in the country coming into the season. And as the season progressed, because of injury and inconsistency, they really kind of fell off. If you look at where they were statistically, 102nd in rushing offense, 85th in yards per carry, 95th in the explosive rushing attack. And Tate Ratledge, Dylan Fairchild, and Jared Wilson, all those guys became all SEC players. Sure, individually they had solid seasons, but collectively the group did not do very well. Those three guys are all now gone. They were all taken in the first 100 picks of the draft. Ernest Green was at left tackle last year, was banged up most of the year and kind of struggled. He now will slide over to right tackle more than likely, where Monroe Freeling, who stepped in and played well at left tackle, he's now kind of locked down that spot. The interior three are all super new. They're all super talented, very talented. Bobo in the center, he's played a lot of football. We've seen Michael Morris before. We've seen a handful of guys that have stepped right in, but cohesiveness was an issue. If the Achilles heel is again the offensive line like it was last year, well, last year was offensive line and wide receiver. They've addressed the wide receiver spot. But if the offensive line does not reach their potential for the second consecutive year, that could bring the expectation level down for the Georgia Bulldogs. But they're still, I think, one of the best teams in America. I would not at all be surprised if they won the national championship. But as of right now, here in the preseason, I have them at number 6. At number 5, the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, here's what I love. I love the wide receivers in the secondary. It's very, very simple. And I think if you look at both collectively, they could have a top 5 wide receiver group in America and a top 5 secondary by season's end. And I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, in the secondary if they're in the top 2, maybe the top 3, maybe even the top spot overall. They have so much experience back there and they have so much talent in the back end defensively. Let's start with the wide receivers, though. Ryan Williams, outside of Jeremiah Smith, I think most people would look at Ryan Williams as the second best game-breaking wide receiver in America this year. Going into his second year, figuring out getting bigger, getting more physical, getting stronger, and now the ability to slide into his more natural position of flanker, Z, strong side wide receiver. That's exactly where he can really excel to the point in which it becomes a multi-time All-American in his first 2 years on campus. Isaiah Horton, his addition, who was the number 2 receiver at Miami last year, his addition to the more traditional X position where he's going to be the weak side, isolation wide receiver, he's a matchup problem. A guy that's going to win a lot of one-on-ones, can go up and make those contested catches in the red zone. Last year, Alabama at wide receiver was a little undersized. They didn't have great length. They didn't have guys that were able to go up and win that super physical 50-50 ball. Isaiah Horton is now that guy, which allows Jeremy Bernard to slide more into the slot and kind of be a versatile piece that can motion, that can give you the jet sweep, that can line up in the backfield, slide out to the slot, and create a matchup problem. Those three by themselves have a chance to be one of the best trios in all of college football. Then you look at some of the depth that they have. You got Cole Adams. He's back from injury, should be a really solid slot receiver. They love Jalen Hale. And there's tons of buzz about a redshirt freshman named Rico Scott, who a lot of people believe is on the cusp of a potential breakout year. So you can go 5, 6, 7 deep at wide receiver for Alabama and whoever their quarterback ends up being. But on the other side of the ball, in the secondary, man, last year, this was the biggest question mark on the entire roster. Now it's probably their biggest strength. You bring back Damani Jackson, who had a chance to go pro, decided to return. You bring back Bray Hubbard, who had a breakthrough year last year because when Keon Sabb got hurt, Bray Hubbard stepped in, had a highly productive season there as a first-year starter. Keon Sabb is now back healthy. He played most of the year last year with an injured foot. He ends up breaking that foot against Tennessee and was lost for the year. But the fact that he played most of last season on one leg tells you what this guy might be capable of. And then Xavier Brown, who had a really good freshman year, could take a big leap as a lockdown corner. You add Cam Calhoun from Utah. He is going to be a great depth piece there as a nickel. I think all over the place. They can go 10 deep in the back end, and that was not at all something they could do a year ago. That's probably their deepest position and maybe their most talented position. Here's what concerns me about Alabama is compared to the best versions of Alabama, compared to the roster of 2015, the roster of 2016, the roster of 2020, 18, all those teams that were always in the mix for a national championship, they had unbelievable depth. This year's team does not have the same type of depth that they've had in the past when they've won national championships. And last year, Alabama kind of quietly got hit with the injury bug. Quay Russaw, their outstanding pass rusher, looked really good in the first couple games, and then against Wisconsin, he gets banged up and is kind of dealing with some injuries throughout the season. They lost Deontay Lawson to a knee injury in the midway point. The defense wasn't quite the same. They lost Keon Sabb, who I referenced already, there in the back end. They lost Quandarius Robinson, who is an outstanding pass rusher in his own right, to a broken arm late in the year. They lost Cole Adams. And those are the guys that missed significant time. The guys I just listed doesn't include the number of guys that were playing far below 100% because of nagging injuries that they suffered throughout the season. There were several guys that couldn't even practice because they were so banged up, yet they had to play on Saturday because they didn't have the depth. And they knew that if they were out, there would be a significant drop-off from the starters to the backups. And it was really noticeable last year, and understandable too, by the way, with all the portal exits after Saban's retirement, that when the starters got hurt, there was a bigger drop-off than what you would expect when watching Alabama. I think they're better equipped to manage it this year, but in the event in which they have a similar injury year to what they had a year ago, they could get really young in a hurry. So that's something that you have to be mindful of. I think their starting 22 has as strong a case as anybody in college football to be one of the best in America. Their starting 22 is outstanding. And if they stay healthy across the board, do not be surprised. This team is contending again for a national championship. But if they get banged up the way they did a little bit last year, then that level of play could drop off a little bit, and that could lead to an unforeseen loss at some point throughout the season. At number 4, it's the Texas Longhorns. What I love most, and we'll talk about talent, we'll talk about personnel, all that stuff's great. They have great star power, and they have great coaching continuity. That's what I love most about this Texas team. With what Steve Sarkisian's built, retaining coaches, making sure his offensive line coach, Kyle Flood, is there. He's also titled with the offensive coordinator, but Steve Sarkisian calls the plays. Pete Kwiatkowski, the defensive coordinator, has been there now 5 years. I mean, these guys have spent a lot of time together, and they're on the heels of back-to-back semifinal performances. Usually when you have that kind of success, a lot of those coaches get taken elsewhere. That has not happened as often on Steve Sarkisian's staff. So I love the coaching continuity, and the star power is off the charts. You look at the wide receiver room, it's packed full of blue chip players. You look at the amount of starters that they lofted in the NFL draft on the defensive side alone. Well, the defensive side might even be more star-studded than it was a year ago. I haven't even mentioned Arch Manning. Arch Manning is arguably the most famous player in college football and has started just 2 games. Now, the potential is off the charts, but what I love most about Arch is how he's approached his own development. I think he's poised for stardom, no doubt about it, partly because of what surrounds him, but I also look too at just how he's handled the spotlight. I think he has the right mentality to approach this season. I think he's going to have a fantastic year. But also, too, I think this is going to be a team that's going to hang their hat on the defense side of the football. Because some of the guys they have, it might be the best defense in America. Some of the guys they have at all 3 levels are off the charts good. It starts kind of in the middle with a guy that can do absolutely anything on the football field at Anthony Hill. 113 tackles last year, 60.5 for a loss, had 8 sacks. He forced 4 fumbles. He's a no-doubt All-American, probably going to be drafted in the first round, can do so many different things on the football field, but he is not alone. I think you have a freshman All-American in Colin Simmons who returns as an edge rusher. He's going to be a take over the game guy, I think, day one against Ohio State. His emergence has allowed a guy like Trey Moore to maybe get a few more reps off the ball. He's naturally going to still rush the passer on third down, I'd imagine, but he's going to be able to become a little bit more versatile because you still have Ethan Burke. You still have a lot of really quality pieces in the back end. Michael Taft is a guy that can do a lot of great things there at safety. They have stars all over the field, and they have great coaching continuity. That's what I absolutely love about the Longhorns this year. Here's what concerns me is the offensive line. I talked about it a little while ago when describing Georgia. Supposed to have a top offensive line. You look at the recruiting trail, you look at how they played, and all of a sudden they become a huge liability. Well, that's kind of where things are this year for Texas. There are so few question marks about this team. This has to be the most glaring question mark. Now, I think the left tackle, Trevor Gooseby, is going to be great. He made a handful of starts last year against top-level competition, filled in admirably when some of their tackles got banged up. I think he's going to be a plug-and-play. No doubt about it, he'll be just fine. Not at all concerned about the right guard and DJ Campbell. I think he's going to be fantastic. He played last year, will play again, and I think he'll play at a really high level. Yes, at center, they have a guy in Cole Hudson who was kind of their sixth man last year, a guy that would fill in at any spot if a guy got banged up. He's played in 38 career games. He's got 13 career starts. He's played 1,251 career snaps. The problem with those 1,251 career snaps, they've all been at guard. He has taken 0 snaps at center. Doesn't mean he can't, doesn't mean he hasn't done it in practice, but in live game action, we have not seen him anchoring the middle of that offensive line. And with a relatively inexperienced quarterback, there's going to be an awful lot on Cole Hudson's shoulders to make sure protections and communication is really good along that front. So that is a question mark for me, even though I don't think talent is in question. They still got to figure out what's going on at left guard, still got to figure out what's going on at right tackle. I think all in all, the talent is there, but will they have the cohesiveness necessary to make a run and become an outstanding offensive line by season's end? That is the question mark right now for the Texas Longhorns. At number 3, it's the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And here's what I love. I love their physicality. If you just watch Notre Dame, doesn't matter who they're playing, they're probably going to win the toughness battle. These guys run and hit better than just about anybody in the entire country. It starts up front with their offensive line. Those guys are the tone setters. And if you think about last year, they lost 3 starters over the course of the season. 3 starters, and yet at season's end, that offensive line was mowing their way to the national championship game. Didn't have any drop-off when those 3 guys go out. And assuming Charles Jagusaw can get back as soon as possible, he hurt his arm a couple weeks ago on an ATV accident, this should be at least, at worst, a top 2, top 3 group in the FBS along the offensive line. All 3 of their running backs run outrageously hard. I mean, they run. Jeremiah Love hits the hole as hard as anybody in the sport. You look at what they also have in Jadarian Price and how he can kind of take some of the load off Jeremiah Love and get to the open field and make guys field as well when they try to initiate contact. I love how hard they run. That's a physical group of backs that you got to love. Even their wide receivers will get in there and mix it up. You watch Jaden Greathouse block, he'll get after you. He will absolutely get after you. And then on the defensive side of the ball, it's a team that had to endure a ridiculous amount of injuries last year, and yet even at season's end, it was one of the best groups in college football. They now bring back Boubacar Traore. You had the advancement of Tuli Alamaka. You got Josh Burnham, who's back and playing at a high level. Jalen Snead's got great athleticism sideline to sideline. I think he's poised for a huge year. Drake Bowen, Jaden Osbury. Like, they are really, really good in the front 7 defensively. And then you have a new addition at nickel. And if you Notre Dame fans are not aware of who Devontae Smith is, you're going to love this addition. This dude is a heat-seeking missile. And while in coverage, he's not the guy that you want to go press coverage against Jeremiah Smith. That's not really who he is. But you want to talk about a guy that'll blitz, a guy that'll kind of hold down the middle and hold down that nickel spot, that slot corner. He is a great addition that they made this offseason. So I think they're in a really good spot from the physicality standpoint. Every single team they play on their schedule, they will be up to the task to match them and possibly exceed them from a physicality standpoint. Here's what concerns me. Losing their defensive coordinator. Look, Al Golden, he takes the defensive coordinator job at the Cincinnati Bengals. He deserves it. He did a ridiculously good job the last couple of years. In comes Chris Ash. And I think people will hear this and they'll think this is some indictment on Chris Ash. No, it's not. It's far from an indictment on what he might become as the new DC of the Irish. But this is more of a tip of the cap to what Al Golden was. We would sit in meetings with Al Golden last year and preparing for calling, a handful of Notre Dame games. Felt like we did all of them there, especially down the stretch. And we got to know Coach Golden really well. And he would sit there and say, all right, here's how this game is going to go. Here's how we win it. This is exactly what we have to do to win. If we don't do this, we have no shot because this is what they're going to do to us, and we need to be prepared to combat what the offense is going to attack us with. And then we'd be sitting there in the booth, and it's like, that's exactly what Al Golden told us was what was going to happen. It was almost like he knew what the offense was going to run before the offense would actually run their plays. He knew the style of game that it would take for them to win, and he played those cards beautifully. Now, Chris Ash, if you look at bona fides, really strong track record, right? He's been the OC or the DC at Ohio State. He's been the DC at Wisconsin. He's been the DC at Arkansas. He's been a head coach in the Big Ten when he was at Rutgers there for 4 years. He's got NFL experience, has been with the Jacksonville Jaguars the last few years, has been there for 4 years. So I think that experience with personnel evaluation, that experience with player development, all that could be majorly beneficial. And if you look at Al Golden had NFL tenure prior to becoming the head coach of the defense there for Marcus Freeman. So I can see that there are some parallels between Chris Ash's track record and Al Golden's track record. Another thing that I think was massive is they were able to retain some of their best position coaches as well, including Mike Mickens there as the defensive backs coach. And a reminder that regardless of who's calling the plays defensively, Marcus Freeman's still the head coach. Like Marcus Freeman is still going to be very involved in making sure the culture from one coordinator to the next doesn't change. The expectation level on that side of the ball doesn't change. But if you look at what Al Golden was able to do in game, dialing up the perfect play at the perfect time to defend the perfectly called offensive play, that's something that does concern me. So Chris Ash, will he have the same understanding of how they match up week to week? That's a question mark. I'm optimistic, but it is right now my biggest concern heading into the year for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. At number 2, the Penn State Nittany Lions. Here's what I love, their coordinators, both sides of the ball. We'll start offensively. Andy Kotelnicki was brought in to do one thing, and that's to become more explosive. The offense for many years was kind of a churn and burn, 3 yards in a cloud of dust type of outfit. Andy Kotelnicki was doing an amazing job at Kansas, and prior to his stint at Kansas, he was at Buffalo. They always seemed to be extremely creative from a formation standpoint, from a personnel standpoint, from a motion standpoint, from a shift standpoint, creating matchups, all that stuff. Andy Kotelnicki had to do more with less for a very long time. Well, now he gets to Penn State, he gets to do more with more. Okay? He really did a fantastic job of making this team more explosive, not just in the run game, but also in the passing game as well. Nobody had more 10-plus yard carries than Penn State last year. And if you look at their offensive passing statistics from an explosiveness standpoint, they went from 122nd in 2023 to 45th in 2024. Now here's hoping they can take the next step with an even better understanding of what Andy Kotelnicki wants from his offensive personnel. And then defensively last year, I loved what Tom Allen did. I mean, he was fantastic, right? But if you're going to replace Tom Allen, who left for Clemson, with Jim Knowles, then you're in a pretty good spot. They go out, they take from their rival. So not only do they get the identity that Jim Knowles has and what he's done forever as a defensive mind, but they also kind of now get to understand a little bit of the inner workings of what goes on in the week of practice with Ohio State to prepare for Penn State. What's been the huge issue for Penn State for the last decade? Beating Ohio State, right? Well, now not only they get their coordinator, they also kind of know the inner workings. They might even know the personnel better as a result of Jim Knowles' arrival. He was the highest paid defensive coordinator in the history of college football. He's got a national championship pedigree, just led Ohio State to the number 1 defense nationally in scoring, total defense, yards per play, touchdowns allowed per play. Everything that he did last year was amazing. And I am really optimistic about how he's going to integrate his mentality into the personnel that's already on campus, because I think the personnel is really, really good. So I love their coordinators. That's what I love most. And their personnel is awesome. We know that. Their personnel, they have a lot of answered questions. That goes without saying. But the coordinators could make this a very difficult team to play against with how they game plan week in and week out. Here's what concerns me. It's replacing Tyler Warren. Their top 6 receivers from a year ago combined for fewer catches than their tight end Tyler Warren last year. That includes a 0 touchdown or 0 catch, 5 target performance in the Orange Bowl. Now, let's start at tight end because Tyler Warren, of course, played that position, but he did so many things for you. Wildcat quarterback, short yardage quarterback. He could do so many things for you. But I think the tight end is actually really good. I think their depth at tight end is outstanding. But there's not a single guy in that room that is anywhere near what Tyler Warren was to that roster last year. I think they're going to be good blocking. Khalil Dinkins, who's going into his 5th year, he's going to be great as a blocker. And he's kind of been waiting for his opportunity behind Warren and Brenton Strange and Theo Johnson. He's physical. He's strong. He can handle it. He can be effective off play action, especially in the red zone. And if you listen to Andy Koldenik, I mean, he'll rave about how much Dinkins means to this roster. The guy I might be most optimistic about becoming a go-to guy in the passing game is Luke Reynolds. Could be a future star. He's poised for kind of a breakout season. And you talk to anybody around the program, it's like, this guy's the next one. He's the next one. He's a 5-star guy. We already saw it a little bit last year, saw the fake punt against Minnesota. Like, there's a lot of things to like about Luke Reynolds. And then you want to go one further. Andrew Rappelier was expected to be kind of a huge contributor last year and then had that season-ending injury in the opener. Now he's back fully healthy. They have a handful of freshmen that might find their way on the field. So what they lose in Tyler Warren individually, they might be able to make up for in depth, but that's still a massive question mark considering how much he meant to them last year. It might also put a little bit more on the receiver room because Trevor Pena from Syracuse, Kyron Hudson from SC, Devontae Ross from Troy, those guys are all also new and are trying to develop some rapport with Aller in the passing attack. I think they're going to be talented. I'm not worried about their talent, but the production is something that concerns me at tight end. That's why Penn State is currently sitting as my number 2 team. At number 1, the Clemson Tigers. Now, here's what I love. I absolutely love their passing attack and defensive line. And those are the things that stand out to me and kind of take them from a good team to an elite team. Let's start with quarterback. I think Cade Klubnik is the best returning quarterback in America. He's got tons of experience. Going into his senior year, has started now, this will be his 3rd year, was widely considered to be a guy that was somewhat disappointing 2 years ago with how he performed. And then the way he played last year was amazing. He showed great development, threw for 3,600 yards, 36 touchdowns, just 6 interceptions. The other part of love about his game was how much more effective he became as a runner. He had over 450 yards rushing last year, a couple of really long runs. So you saw some of the athleticism. And I think the chemistry that he's going to have now in his 3rd year working with his offensive coordinator, Garrett Riley, is going to allow him an even deeper understanding of how to attack teams, when to attack teams situationally, and how to execute in high-octane situations like a 2-minute drill. His supporting cast is off the charts. If you look at the wide receiver, it's probably as good as we've seen from Clemson in a really long time. Look, for a while there, they were kind of banged up. They were really young at wide receiver. That's no longer the case. Antonio Williams going into his senior year, one of the best wideouts in America, just a great playmaker, well-rounded wide receiver. But on the outside, you have unbelievable speed in Bryant Wesco, who can get over the top of anybody defensively. You got size, strength, matchup problems, refinement from TJ Moore. Those 2 guys going into their sophomore year, you can expect a huge jump from them. This group is extremely explosive and they're extremely well-rounded. But the defensive line might be the best unit they have on their team, which is kind of wild when you think about it, because it's constantly considered, at least for the last few years, one of the better groups in America. It all starts with TJ Parker, who at the defensive end spot led all Power 4 edge defenders, 12 sacks last year, incredibly disruptive. Every single time he was on the field, it felt like he was on the cusp of taking over the game. Peter Woods, last year, because of depth issues, had to slide out to defensive end. Now he's going to be back to his more natural position of defensive tackle. Really good against the run, really disruptive on the interior. So they should be really good with those 2 stars there along the front, but they get deep in a hurry as well. You add Will Help from Purdue, really highly regarded player coming over. They don't often go to the portal, but now they have some depth at that position. They made him a high priority. You got a true freshman, Amari Adams, got to feel good about how he could factor in at some point during the season. And the new DC with Tom Allen coming down, I think this could make this group even more aggressive than they were a year ago. So I love what they have at wide receiver with offensive weaponry, and I love what they have along the defensive line. The one thing that concerns me, you look at this roster all over the place, man, it is stacked. This is their year. This is Clemson's year to really make a run. It feels like they've circled 2025, and this is the year to go all in, and they could very well do so. The one question mark is the running back depth. Lose Phil Maffa, a guy that was highly productive, kind of a bell cow the last couple of years. He was a guy that might not have had crazy top-end speed, but was physical and kind of a tone setter there in the run game, even though at times last year he was a little bit banged up. They have an injury to Jay Haynes, who was expected to be one of the guys this year that would be in the rotation to maybe be the number one. Well, he tears his ACL on the ACC championship game. Coming back off major injury, they think he's got a chance to be back and ready to roll, but will he be the same shifty Haynes that we saw last year? They have some unproven depth as well. Gideon Davidson's a guy that everybody raves about. Highly regarded true freshman, one of the top backs in the country coming out. He might be a day one star, but it is at least right now a bit of a question mark. We've seen Clemson have success with true freshman backs in the past. Can they do it again with Davidson? You got Jarvis Green, you got Eziomi. Like, they got plenty of guys. It's just a lot of it is unproven. They've never had the workload that's going to be expected from them here in 25 as a featured back. So that's the one question on the roster. But right now, Clemson is the top dog coming in to 2025. That'll do it for us here on Always College Football. We appreciate all of you reaching out and watching our show. The amount of viewership we're getting is going up like crazy. We appreciate that. We're putting a lot of hard work in, trying to get you guys prepared, trying to give you good quality content, no hot takes, just kind of straightforward football is our goal here on Always College Football, and we always appreciate the support that you guys have shown us. Download the podcast wherever you get the podcast. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you get the podcast. It'll automatically be there, ready for you to listen every time we put out a new episode. And if you're here with us via the ESPN College Football YouTube channel, hit that thumbs up button and continue to watch our content as we clip it out throughout the week. For all of us here at Always College Football, for Mark, Jake, Jack, the other Jack, intern Sam, I'm Greg. We hope you have an amazing day. And remember, it's always college football. Hey guys, it's Greg McElroy. Thanks for watching Always College Football. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe to ESPN's YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts.